You ever worked somewhere and just felt stuck? Or maybe you've been on a team that moved so fast it was almost like magic? Well, that feeling, it's not an accident. It's actually by design. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the hidden blueprint that shapes every single company, its organizational structure. Think of it as the invisible architecture that decides how literally everything gets done. Okay, let's get into it.
So, what is the secret sauce here? I mean, why can one company just pivot on a dime while another one feels like it's stuck in mud? It all comes down to how they're built, a series of very deliberate choices about where power sits, how information flows, and really who's in control.
To really understand how these blueprints are drawn up, you've got to start with the basic building blocks. Turns out there are 3 core decisions every leader has to make when they're designing their organization.
First up, we've got the chain of command. The easiest way to think about this is like the company's skeleton. It's that simple, unbroken line of authority that answers the most basic question for every single employee. Who do I report to? It's all about clarity and order. Next, there's something called span of control. This one's all about the numbers. How many people can one manager actually lead well? You know, if you have a narrow span, you get a really tall company with tons of layers of management. But a wide span, that creates a much flatter, more streamlined kind of place.
And last but definitely not least is centralization. Honestly, this might be the most important one of all. It answers the big question, where does the buck really stop? Is all the decision-making power hoarded at the very top, or is it handed out to the people who are closest to the action?
And that right there, that's the fundamental trade-off, really. Centralization gives you that tight, top-down control and makes sure the entire ship is steering in exactly the same direction. But decentralization, that empowers the folks on deck to react to the waves as they come. It's this constant tug-of-war between control and speed.
So once you've wrestled with those 3 big decisions, you can start putting them together into different kinds of blueprints, or what we call organizational models. Let's take a look at the most common ones you'll see out there.
So, the big question is, how do you group your people? Well, you could organize them by what they do. Create these specialized departments for sales, HR, marketing, that kind of thing. Or you could group them by what they're focused on, like a specific product or a geographic region. And then there's the really ambitious approach, trying to do both at the same time.
So first, you've got the classic functional structure. This is where everyone in marketing reports to a head of marketing, everyone in finance reports to a head of finance. You get the picture. It's absolutely fantastic for building deep, specialized skills, but it can also lead to that whole not my department problem.
Then you've got the divisional structure, and this one is all about focus. So imagine a giant company with a totally separate division for its car business and another one for its smartphone business. Each one basically acts like its own mini company, super tuned in to its specific market. The upside is incredible focus. The downside is you might end up duplicating a lot of roles and resources.
And then we have the matrix. This is the structure you pull out when things get seriously complex. Here, an employee actually has 2 bosses, like they report to the head of engineering and the manager of the specific project they're working on. It's designed to give you the best of both worlds, but man, it can be a recipe for some serious confusion and power struggles if it's not managed perfectly.
Okay, so theory is great and all, but let's see how this stuff plays out in the real world. We're going to look at a super interesting case study, the consumer goods giant Unilever. They were staring down a massive challenge that put their entire structure to the ultimate test.
So here was their big dilemma, what people call the global local challenge. How on earth do you become huge and super efficient on a global scale, but also stay nimble enough to sell, say, soap that appeals to people in both India and Indiana? Those 2 goals are almost always fighting each other.
So, how did they crack this puzzle? With a truly brilliant hybrid structure. So at the very top, they created these huge global product divisions, things like home care or personal care, to drive strategy and efficiency. But then, and this is the genius part, they gave a ton of power to their local country managers to tweak products and marketing to fit what local people actually wanted.
And the result? This is just a perfect example of intentional design. By mixing and matching different models, Unilever figured out how to get the best of both worlds, all the power of being a global company with the sharp instincts of a local one. It wasn't luck, it was just really smart architecture.
And all of this brings us to the core takeaway here. See, designing an organization isn't about finding some single perfect model that works for everyone. It's about managing an ongoing, ultimate, balancing act.
At the end of the day, every single structural choice you make is about managing this one core tension. On one side, you have the constant pull of stability, that need for control, for efficiency, for predictable results. And on the other side, you've got the push for innovation, the need for speed, for flexibility, and for the freedom to experiment. Every company lives somewhere on this spectrum, and the right spot is always a moving target.
And that leaves us with one final, and I think really important question. As the very nature of work keeps changing, with AI, remote teams, all of it, the old blueprints might not cut it anymore. So what kind of structure, what kind of blueprint will the most successful and resilient companies of tomorrow be built on?